Deja vu, I just been in this place before. All the trains have been stopped because of the typhoon.
Are they finally gonna do it? Are they finally gonna talk about the dub for Kaguya-sama, Love is War? No, not yet. Oh, calm down, I said not yet. However, while we were going over scenes for our breakdown of the dub proper, there was one moment that absolutely broke me, and now you all get to suffer. My name is AJ of the Cartoon Cipher, and if you'd like to share your support, be sure to give the video a like, subscribe for more content covering stuff like this, and maybe check out our Patreon if you have the time. Also, any corrections can be found in the pinned comment down below. So, at the start of episode 9, there's a loud thunderstorm that scares Chika, so she tries to hide her belly button with her hands to stop the thunder god from stealing it. When she tells Shirogane that she's scared of the loud noises, he asks why she doesn't just cover her ears with her hands, and then this happens.
Is she using that word right? Straightforward. All the trains have been stopped because of the typhoon.
See this? This right here doesn't really make sense in English. Shirogane is a smart guy. I mean, he's ranked number 1 in the entire school, and even though he's a bit socially awkward, I don't think he'd be clueless enough about what straightforward means to look it up on his phone. But even if that were the case, and he's just checking, like his dialogue implies, he's using voice to text on his phone to look it up, and for some reason, looking up the phrase straightforward immediately leads him to a search result that tells him the trains are delayed? This is nothing major, and normally I'd just chalk this up to the ADR writer or translator missing the mark, but it goes deeper than that. Because even in the Funimation subtitles and the GSK-kun fan subs we cross-referenced, this scene still doesn't make any sense. The official subs use the word obvious instead of straightforward, and GSK-kun tweaked the dialogue slightly to make the word be stop. The former doesn't really make any more sense than the dub does, but while the latter might work as a connecting search result for the train, there's even less of a reason why Shirogane would think to look up the word stop either. So, what's going on here? In the original Japanese version, Chika is saying futsu, which can mean something along the lines of obvious, average, or normal. And in fact, that's how it was officially translated in the manga. Here she says that he would understand how she felt if he, quote, thought about it like a normal person. So in the anime, we hear Shirogane say futsu into his phone. Futsu. And what ends up happening is the voice to text brings up a different kanji spelling that's pronounced the same. This spelling of the word futsu actually directly translates to stop, hence why his phone leads to the search results telling him that the trains are stopped because of the rain. Without going into too much detail, Japanese as a language doesn't have as many individual spoken sounds that make up words as, say, English does. However, it does have a lot of kanji characters, and they can be read in different ways depending on the context. The result of these two factors is that some different kanji combinations can sound the same, but fundamentally mean different things.
That's why I'll never forgive the Japanese!
In other words, this futsu and this futsu are homophones, identical sounding words with different spellings and meanings. Here's an English example.
To pay, please.
Oh, grand. We take check or cash?
To pay, you idiot. My hair is in your machine.
Oh, no, it's only rabbits in there. The hair, I think you'll find, is a much larger mammal.
Out of my way, fool.
You see, that's the kind of thing we've been bashing our head against the wall over. This is basically a play on words, but you might be asking, why on earth was Shirogane looking up the word normal on his phone? The implication is that he's confused about Chika saying he's not thinking normal. So he looks up what normal is on his phone to see if he was the one in the wrong for not taking Chika's rather odd concerns in this scene seriously. In fact, this whole exchange in the manga is just 2 panels, and it's shown so quickly that you don't even really get the sense that he was using voice to text on his phone. All we get is a thought bubble about him wondering what normal means, and then we move right along to his phone saying that the trains are delayed. Our friend Isla McTear, who was generous enough to provide the manga localization, actually thought that he was getting a notification alert on his phone, because the manga doesn't really highlight the exchange. Compare that to the anime, where the scene is stretched out a bit more and we slowly and explicitly focus on him speaking into his phone. The anime draws more attention to the word futsu, and nothing about Shirogane's face or tone during the scene necessarily implies that he's being paranoid. He doesn't have that sweat drop like he does in the manga, he just kinda stares into space like he always does. So maybe the generous interpretation I had for the manga doesn't entirely work here either.
What the fuck's going on?
The anime adaptation has been largely praised by fans for the way that it uses visual metaphors and elaborate directing to elevate the original material. However, this might actually be an instance where all those extra added details ended up backfiring. I genuinely have no idea how a non-Japanese speaker is supposed to understand this scene without some kind of assistance or workaround. We actually reached out to a few Japanese speakers, some of whom are professional translators, just to make heads or tails of this. You can't directly translate this scene because the joke relies on the use of specific kanji. Otherwise, you're not going to understand the connection between a translation of the word normal and a translation of the word stop, at least in English. The immediate solution would probably be a translator's note, maybe something like, the Japanese word for normal and stop sound identical. And maybe that might have worked for the subbed version, but for a dub, adding extra text to translate things might be kind of redundant. Plus, some people do stand by the motto of, if you have to explain the joke, it isn't funny. There are basically two parts of this exchange that need to be fulfilled in order for it to make sense contextually. Firstly, Chika needs to say something that would reasonably motivate Shirogane to look it up on his phone to make sense of it. Secondly, whatever Chika said needs to somehow believably bring up a search result relating to the trains being delayed. Sara Moon pointed out that when it comes to adapting puns, one way to work around them is to start with the punchline and then go backwards. So to try and emulate the same experience, we'd have to start with the reaction of, the trains are being delayed by the rain, and tweak Chika's dialogue so that it includes at least one of those words. But also make sure that what she's saying is obscure or out there enough for Shirogane to look it up. For example, Sarah suggested Chika say brain stoppage, then the voice to text brings up train stoppage. Jake Jung from Sentai Filmworks suggested maybe something with the word suspension, though he'd obviously think about it more if he had more time. The issue here is that now, while Shirogane does have a plausible motivation to check his phone, it isn't necessarily to check his own actions, but rather to check a weird or unconventional word usage he doesn't quite understand.
Some may say it's a good change, others may say it's a bad change.
Initially, we asked Aaron Dismuke, the ADR director for the Season 1 dub, as well as the English voice for Shirogane himself, and even he admitted that he was a bit stuck about what exactly the scene was supposed to communicate, defaulting to the translation he was given.
That one, I just assumed that it was a elevated diction word, like in Japanese, and that Chika used it half right, and that he pulled out his phone just to check that word, but happened to also see the train thing. I was at a loss to find a word that means straightforward, that is elevated diction enough to where Chika would use it, but maybe use it wrong. And so yeah, I just went with what they had gone with on that one. That's definitely what Jessica gave me, and I believe it was true with the translation, because I remember checking it.
But after we explained the situation to him, he actually did come up with his own alternative where he would have tried to do a pun with train and training. So while these alternatives aren't perfect, it definitely would have been a bit more seamless within the scene, and I do have confidence that the ADR staff would have pulled it off with the foresight since they were able to adapt similar exchanges in the dub pretty seamlessly.
I'm scared! No! I mean, I'm scared for the future of our country!
Why is she freaking out?
The Kaguya-sama dub sometimes disregards the exact meaning of on-screen Japanese text, but this is a case where it's unavoidable. Another strategy I thought of is based on something else within the scene. The reason Chika wants to hide her tummy from the thunder seems to be based on a thing some adults tell children in Japan. In folklore, there's a thunder god called Raijin, or Raiju, who is said to eat the belly buttons of children. Maybe Shirogane could have wondered something like, do grown-up people still believe that? Then gone to look up thunder on voice-to-text, only to see the news that a thunderstorm had stopped the train service. It might actually be similar to how the Fooly Cooly dub handled this joke in episode 5, by changing it from a misunderstanding about the kanji for blue, fish, and mackerel, to a misunderstanding about the difference between robots and cyborgs, both of which fit within the scene's context.
Ow! Actually, confusing cyborgs with robots is a common mistake.
You could scour the most comprehensive list of English homophones there is till you find one pair among many that could be reworked into this exact scenario. Then, somehow twist the dialogue around them. But which pair would it be? Break and break, fair and fair, no and no, root and root, stationary and stationary? Let us know if you can think of one in the comments, but personally I'm stumped. The only other option I came across was this. According to translator Andrew Hodgson, futsu ni can also be a colloquial intensifier or affirmative prefix, which makes something with a neutral meaning sound more positive or intensified. The assumption here is that this is how Shirogane interpreted futsu in this scene and thus wanted to check what Chika meant by it, even though Chika just meant to say the word normal. For an equivalent, imagine if they went into a building and Chika said that it was lit. Maybe Shirogane knows Chika isn't saying the building is literally on fire, but he could also not be aware of that specific slang, which means cool or exciting. And again, that's assuming that's what the intention was. Now you might be asking, why on earth did we spend so much time breaking down this awkwardly translated scene if it didn't really affect our overall impressions of the dub proper? And you're absolutely right, why did we spend so much time doing that? I just think it's interesting that nowadays it's common for people to get hung up on just one line or one specific exchange in the dub for an entire series of episodes, and yet here we have a scene from the first season that technically didn't even work in the official or unofficial subtitles. Not even this take from the Spanish subs worked that well from what I can gather. And this isn't even a recent example either. Season 1 has been out for years at this point, and yet I have not seen a single person talk about this exchange whenever translation discourse ever comes up. One of the reasons I wanted to break it down is because I feel like we're going to be bringing it up a lot in the future, since it perfectly encapsulates how some methodologies towards translation, localization, and adaptation don't unilaterally work. There are scenes in other anime that are much more pivotal to their overall stories than this brief exchange, and they also have to work around issues like specific Japanese characters or homophones to make sense. Sometimes you need to think outside the box in order to emulate a similar experience, even if you can't always get exactly identical. While other times, it's definitely possible to keep these kinds of jokes and have them be just as funny.
Nendo, do you see any signs for a restaurant, Todoroki?
I see one named Sha Sha Sha.
Sha Sha Sha?
3 Sha kanji characters in a row.
That doesn't sound familiar.
Nope, that's Todoroki.
I wouldn't call the Kaguya-sama scene untranslatable, but there is definitely more going against it than your standard exchange in an anime, and I can understand why it slipped through the cracks because there's so much that needs to be done to just understand the scene, let alone adapt it properly for those who will in no way get the joke at face value. The correct solution of what the best fix is depends on what part of the scene you're most concerned about. Specifically, what Chika says, specifically what motivates Shirogane to look it up on his phone, or the specific connection between them. But I'm very curious what everyone else's thoughts are and what exchanges you would have supplemented here if you were given the chance, since there really doesn't feel like a perfect right answer. Do you know of any other anime scenes with tricky linguistics that revolve around specific Japanese characters and homophones? Which translated version of this Kaguya-sama scene do you prefer if you have a preference? Leave a comment below and tell us your thoughts.
Yoi, yoi, fonda yo!
Once again, thank you so much to all of the individual people whose names are appearing on screen right now who helped us unpack this scene and offer their suggestions. And as per usual, any updates or corrections can be found in the pinned comment down below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, and maybe even consider checking out our Patreon. Special thanks to the generous people already donating, including Reagan Senpai, Andrew Wade Pickman, E.Hoba, Jose Argumedo, JR Pictures, Marissa Lenti, Spartacus, Ryan Rodriguez, Queen Era 2, Tristan Gallant, Unknown Secret 1000, and Xavier Gordon. This has been the Cartoon Cipher, and until next time, where you'll all get to see our breakdown of the dub proper.